Hong Kong lashed by a second tropical cyclone in just a few days. A search and rescue operation on Fei'an Shan after 2 hikers lost their way overnight. And in the United States, a monster hurricane leaves widespread damage in Texas.
Good evening. Just days after severe Typhoon Hato slammed into Hong Kong, the city was brought to a standstill this morning by a second storm. Damage caused by severe tropical storm Pakar was not as serious as Hato. Still, it felled 236 trees and left more than 60 people injured. Rachel Leung has more.
Hong Kongers woke up to a feeling of deja vu this morning as the sound of another storm lashed their windows. Most people were still in bed when the Hong Kong Observatory issued the number 8 southeast gale or storm signal at 5:10 a.m. The amber rainstorm warning was also in force. Severe tropical storm Pakar, packing maximum gusts up to more than 170 kilometers an hour, churned up water along shorelines, causing big waves to lash seafront buildings. A van driver was killed when his vehicle overturned in Tuen Mun. The incident happened at around 7 a.m. when the van was moving on Yuen Long Highway towards Tuen Mun. The driver lost control of the vehicle and slammed into a guardrail. The 42-year-old who was thrown out of the vehicle suffered serious neck injuries. He was taken to Tuen Mun Hospital where he was certified dead. 2 passengers also sustained minor injuries. Police said the driver was wearing a seatbelt but could not confirm if the accident was a direct result of the storm. Meanwhile, the government flying service was alerted to a sunken cargo vessel about 64 nautical miles east of Hong Kong. 11 crew members of the mainland vessel were rescued. One of the sailors suffered minor injuries. There were also numerous reports of fallen trees and scaffolding collapses. A scaffolding in Western with an area of 20 by 6 meters collapsed during the storm. A section of the Connor Road West flyover had to be temporarily closed. A scaffolding in Kowloon City also collapsed. In Wong Tai Sin in East Kowloon, firefighters were called out to remove a fallen tree on Fung Tub Road. Tai Hom Road in the same district was flooded, with a taxi being stuck in water in the middle of the road. In Tai O on Lantau Island, winds occasionally reached hurricane force. Local residents and government workers joined forces to protect homes and businesses in the area. Workers from the Drainage Services Department set up flood barriers to prevent the community there from being flooded. Civil aid service personnel were also sent to clear up the alleys and warn residents should the water reach a dangerous level. A similar scene in Le Yuen in East Kowloon. The area had only just recovered from floods brought about by Hato. Gale force winds caused choppy seas. Hong Fa Chin in the Eastern District, which just days ago was hard hit by Typhoon Hato, was battered again by heavy rain. Debris littered the pavements while the strong winds toppled some metal railings.
You'd be forgiven for thinking that this trail of destruction was caused by Pakar, but this debris is actually left over from Typhoon Hato as residents pick up the pieces following that storm.
Pakar eventually made landfall over Taishan in Guangzhou sometime before 10 a.m. The observatory issued the strong wind signal number 3 at 1:40 p.m., replacing the number 8 southeast gale or storm signal, which had been in force for more than 8 hours. The number 3 signal was replaced by the standby signal number 1 at 5:40 in the afternoon. Rachel Leung, TVB News.
One couple decided to challenge nature last night and went hiking just before the tropical cyclone signal number 8 was issued. But things didn't seem to go as they had planned. Over 100 firefighters ended up having to rescue them in the storm. Winna Wong has the details.
After being stranded on Fei'an Shan for over 20 hours, the male hiker was the first to be rescued. He was escorted down the peak, then taken to United Christian Hospital for a checkup. According to firefighters, he did not suffer any injuries. The female hiker, however, was not so lucky. She apparently sustained injuries on her head and legs and needed to be carried away from the scene. Officers received the call at around 7 p.m. last night. A man and a woman asked for help after they got lost near the television transmission station. The pair are reportedly from the mainland. Firefighters spent about 4 hours hiking up the hill and finally found them on a cliff near Choi Fai Estate. Due to the bad weather, a firefighter reportedly slipped and injured himself during the rescue. The storm signal number 8 was raised shortly after 5 this morning. Firefighters decided to wait for the storm to blow over before taking the pair to hospital. Over 100 officers ended up being deployed. Authorities reminded people once again to do enough research and make sure conditions are safe before setting off for a hike. Winna Wong, TVB News.
Macau was not spared by Pakar either. This as the city suffered devastating damage from severe Typhoon Hato just several days ago. Residents say this time the government did a better job of keeping them informed. Winna Wong again.
Macau braced itself for yet another major storm today. At this apartment complex here in Area Preta, a number of windows had already been shattered when Hato swept through the region just days ago. And under Pakar, things only got worse. Residents tried to keep nature out by boarding up their broken windows. Others rushed to check on their cars for fear that, like Hato, Pakar would fill underground parking lots with water. Underground car parks were practically empty today. Near the Red Market, firefighters worked to get rid of wobbly signs. Macau authorities were heavily criticized during Hato for not being able to prepare for and handle natural disasters. But according to this resident, the government did a better job this time. He said authorities notified residents hours before they hoisted typhoon signals, so they had time to prepare. Macau authorities officially lowered the typhoon signal number 8 at 1 o'clock this afternoon. People's Liberation Army soldiers were out and about once again during the aftermath, clearing up roads and helping with the cleanup. On Wednesday, Macau was torn to pieces when Hato hit. At least 10 people died, mostly from drowning when an underground parking lot quickly flooded up. Hundreds of people were injured as well. And there were power and water supply problems in the aftermath of Hato. Chief Executive Fernando Choi has since apologized for the government's handling of the crisis. Macau's weather chief, Fong Soi-kun, has resigned from his post. Here in Hong Kong, a Macau expert says problems have probably existed within the Macanese government for a while, but it's all suddenly surfaced because of Hato.
I think in the previous case, simply because there was nothing happened, no accidents happened, so that's why no one would raise the question. But this time there are some casualties, yeah, and most of people would find that they don't have enough time to do the preparation. So it looks that there is not enough transparency for the decision making in the case of Macau.
The government has also announced a compensation scheme for the injured and deceased, but Chan says that won't be enough.
Especially for those victims, for the victims' relatives, they would like to see some reform and some new measure, so in order to minimize the loss in the next time, so that such kind of accidents won't happen once again. So money is only a temporary relief.
Winna Wong, TVB News.
In the United States, Hurricane Harvey is still pounding Texas. The monster storm has killed 2 people, triggered catastrophic flooding, and left hundreds of thousands of people in the dark. Harvey roared into Texas late Friday as a Category 4 hurricane, the most powerful storm to hit the state in 50 years. Harvey wreaked utter devastation in worse-hit Rockport. It was left battered and bruised as winds punched the town at 209 kilometers per hour. Houses on several streets were obliterated. For many, there is no home to return to.
We have nothing left.
One person died in a house fire in Rockport. More than 1,000 first responders are now conducting search and rescue operations for those missing, stranded in flood-prone areas or at sea.
Over the course of last night and this morning, we were getting multiple reports of several different people on vessels in trouble.
Coast Guard helicopters rescued 18 people from various boats and barges in distress. Since Friday, Harvey has weakened to a tropical storm. However, it's still causing widespread destruction as it continues to hover over Texas. Weather experts say it's expected to lash Texas with relentless rain until at least Wednesday. It's already dumped several months' worth of rain, triggering massive flooding throughout the Gulf Coast.
You all know the well-known phrase, and that is turn around, don't drown. Don't risk your life.
In its path of destruction, it has ripped apart homes. Power lines not buried triggered fiery explosions, knocking out power to 300,000 residents. Witnessing so many structures decimated in the town of Fulton left the mayor in tears.
Our town is destroyed, and it hurts.
Since driving is too risky, Texans are wading through waters in search of storm supplies. In Houston, the nation's fourth largest city, the usual worry of catastrophic flooding took a back seat after a string of tornadoes began slamming the area. The wicked vortex of violent winds tore homes to shreds. It left windows shattered and holes in the roofs. Then the unrelenting rain began pounding Houston. It caused its bayous, creeks, and rivers to overflow. The second storm fatality was an elderly woman who was killed as she drove through the flooded streets of Houston. The Federal Emergency Management Agency insists help is on its way.
We have several search and rescue, the federal search and rescue teams that we put down there. We have several thousands of liters of water already pre-positioned down there, blankets, cots, you name it.
The Texas governor was seen serving residents at a shelter in Austin.
We have to realize that what these people left behind was sheer tragedy. Some of them had their homes mowed down. Some of them will not have a place to return to. They need this time and this place and this food right here.
He vowed evacuation centers will remain open to anyone, including those rendered homeless, and for as long as it takes. Swiss authorities have suspended a search for 8 missing hikers believed to have been caught in a landslide on Wednesday. The tiny settlement of Bondo was partially destroyed when part of a mountain collapsed. There was a second landslide Friday, but the area had been evacuated. Police say the possibility of more rock slides posing a danger to rescue workers factored into their decision. The hikers were from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and were believed to have been in that vicinity. Experts say melting permafrost due to higher temperatures was likely only a minor factor behind the disaster. They believe longer-term changes to the structure of the mountain over the last 1,000 years played a larger role. Authorities in Venezuela have shut down 2 radio stations and launched military exercises to silence those critical of President Nicolas Maduro. The radio stations were ordered to stop transmitting news and told their licenses would not be renewed. The president of the country's radio chamber said it's obvious Maduro was trying to muzzle freedom of expression. Maduro also ordered 2 days of military exercises with the hope of deterring U.S. military intervention. Meantime, thousands of people marched in Caracas yesterday to show their rejection of U.S. economic sanctions.
Still to come tonight in our broadcast, tensions in India as a self-styled religious guru faces up to life in prison in a rape case. Rohingya Muslims flee Myanmar amid renewed clashes and... Welcome back. Indian security forces are trying to restore calm in the country's north after at least 36 people were killed in violence by supporters of a quasi-religious sect leader convicted of rape. More than 500 people have been arrested. Alan Booknia reports.
After the court on Friday declared the sect leader guilty of raping 2 of his followers in 2002, mobs set fire to government buildings, vandalized bus stations, and set fire to trains. Police used tear gas and water cannon to disperse the crowd. Tens of thousands of followers had been camped outside the courthouse in Panchkula for days, waiting for the verdict. The destruction left hundreds stranded at train stations. More than 340 trains were cancelled yesterday. The self-proclaimed guru of bling, Gurmeet Ram Rahim Singh, was flown out of Panchkula to another town because district officials were worried about being overrun by supporters. Yesterday, hundreds of security forces were deployed in Panchkula and Singh's hometown of Sisra. Thousands of his followers are holed up in his headquarters in Sisra. Authorities are appealing to them to come out and go home. The sect claims about 50 million followers and campaigns for vegetarianism and is against drug addiction. It's also taken up social causes such as organizing weddings for poor couples. Such sects have huge followings in India. These protests were the biggest this year related to a God-man spiritual leader. India's Home Secretary said the situation was under control in most of Haryana and neighboring Punjab. Authorities are bracing for more violence on Monday when Singh is scheduled to be sentenced. Rape in India carries a minimum of 7 years in jail. Singh is also under investigation over allegations that he convinced 400 of his male followers to undergo castration. He's denied all the charges. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
The Myanmar government has evacuated at least 4,000 non-Muslim villagers amid ongoing clashes in northwestern Rakhine State. This has thousands of Rohingya Muslims fled across the border to Bangladesh. The latest violence erupted on Friday when Rohingya insurgents armed with guns, sticks, and homemade bombs carried out coordinated attacks on 30 police stations and an army base. The attacks left 98 people dead, 80 insurgents and 12 members of the security forces. The clashes prompted the government to evacuate staff and thousands of non-Muslim villagers from the area. The attacks marked an escalation of a conflict that has simmered in the region since last October. The treatment of some 1.1 million Muslim Rohingya in mainly Buddhist Myanmar has emerged as the biggest challenge for national leader Aung San Suu Kyi. She condemned the raids, but the Nobel Peace Laureate has been accused by some critics of not speaking out for the long-persecuted Muslim minority and of defending the army's counteroffensive after the attacks.
A trial has begun in Ecuador for 20 fishermen whose Chinese-flagged vessel was seized transporting carcasses of endangered species. The ship was seized August 14th while navigating in the Galapagos Marine Reserve. The men are accused of transporting threatened and endangered species. If convicted of environmental crimes, the defendants could face up to 3 years in prison. Authorities said some 300 tons of sharks, fish, and other slaughtered sea life were found in the ship's hull. Ecuador has filed a formal protest with the Chinese government for the presence of over 100 small Chinese-flagged vessels operating in or near that marine reserve. It was declared a World Heritage Center by UNESCO for its maritime diversity. Hundreds of Russians rallied to support internet freedom. The streets of downtown Moscow were filled with people on Saturday. They said it was important to show their support for internet freedom. This particular rally was authorized by authorities. Protesters chanted slogans against Russia's communications regulator and online censorship. In the end, 17 protesters were detained by police. All right, Chris, what do you have for us in sports today?
Well, we got something people were waiting for. Finally got to see it. Yeah, not supposed to be much, but a lot of money anyway.
Awesome.
Floyd Mayweather Jr. defeated MMA star Conor McGregor in what could be the richest boxing event in history. McGregor